You know, there's something absolutely fascinating that happens when a person begins to wake up spiritually. And I don't mean waking up in the morning and having your coffee, though that's pleasant enough. I'm talking about that moment when the veil drops, when you suddenly see through the game we've all been playing, when reality reveals itself to be far stranger and more beautiful than you ever imagined. Most people think spiritual awakening is about gaining something: enlightenment, peace, special powers, cosmic consciousness. But here's the delicious irony. It's actually about recognizing what was always there. It's like finally noticing you've been breathing your whole life, or realizing the ocean was wet all along. What nobody tells you is that this awakening doesn't arrive with trumpets and angels. It arrives with feelings, very specific, very peculiar feelings that make you wonder if you're going crazy or finally going sane. And today I want to talk about 7 of these feelings, because if you're experiencing them, you're not losing your mind, you're finding it. The first thing you feel when you begin to wake up is a curious kind of homesickness. But it's not nostalgia for a place you've been or a time you've lived through. It's deeper than that. It's as if some part of you remembers something your conscious mind has forgotten. You'll be sitting in a coffee shop or walking down a familiar street, and suddenly you'll be struck by the most peculiar sensation that you don't quite belong here. Not in a negative way, not like you're an outcast or a failure, but as if you're remembering that you're visiting, that you're a traveler passing through, that home is somewhere else, somewhere you can't quite name. This feeling unsettles people terribly. They think something's wrong with them. They think they're becoming depressed or disconnected. But actually the opposite is happening. They're becoming connected to something larger than their personal story, their individual identity, their role in the social play. Think of it like this. Imagine you're an actor who's been performing a role for so long that you forgot you were acting. You became completely absorbed in the character, convinced that this is who you truly are. And then one day, mid-performance, you suddenly remember, oh, I'm an actor. This is a play. This character I've been so worried about, so identified with, and it's just a costume I'm wearing. That's the homesickness. It's your true self remembering that you're more than the character you've been playing. And yes, it can feel disorienting, but it's also the beginning of freedom. I once knew a woman who described this feeling perfectly. She said, I keep having these moments where I feel like I'm supposed to be somewhere else, doing something else, being someone else. But I can't figure out where or what or who. It's like I'm homesick for a place that doesn't exist. But here's what she didn't realize yet. The place does exist. It's just not a location on a map. It's a state of being. It's the awareness that observes all experiences, the consciousness that remains constant while everything else changes. That's home. That's what you're homesick for. And the beautiful joke is, you've never left it. The second feeling that arrives with awakening is perhaps the most difficult to bear. You begin to see everyone's pain with almost painful clarity. Not just the obvious sufferings, illness, poverty, loss, but the quiet, desperate suffering that most people carry around inside them like a secret burden. You look at the businessman rushing past, checking his phone, and you see it, the fear that he's not enough, that he's falling behind, that his worth is measured by his productivity. You look at the woman posting her perfect life on social media, and you see through it the loneliness, the need for validation, the terror of being truly seen. You look at your own family members, your friends, your colleagues, and suddenly you understand them in ways that break your heart open. This isn't judgment. In fact, it's the opposite of judgment. When you truly wake up, you see that everyone is doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have access to. You see that all the annoying behaviors, the selfishness, the cruelty, it all comes from fear and pain and confusion. No one is a villain in their own story. Everyone believes they have good reasons for what they do. But here's what makes this feeling so difficult. You can see the solutions. You can see exactly what would help, what would heal, what would free people from their self-created prisons. But you also realize something that took me years to understand. You can't force anyone to wake up. You can't make someone see what they're not ready to see. It's like watching someone struggle to open a door, and you know they're pushing when they should be pulling. You want to help. You want to show them. But until they're ready to try something different, until they're tired enough of struggling, they won't hear you. And if you force the lesson on them, you just become another voice telling them they're doing it wrong. This awareness can make you feel very alone, because suddenly you're living in a different world from most people. You're seeing through the game while everyone else is still playing it with deadly seriousness. You're watching the movie while everyone else is convinced it's real life. But here's the gift hidden in this difficulty. This clarity about suffering naturally gives birth to compassion. Not the sentimental kind, not the pitying kind, but a deep, clear-eyed compassion that sees people exactly as they are and loves them anyway. Not because they're good or bad, but because they're fellow travelers in this strange journey of consciousness exploring itself. The third thing you feel is that time begins to behave very oddly. Minutes can feel like hours, or hours like minutes. The future stops feeling quite so real. The past becomes more like a story you tell yourself than something that actually happened. This is unsettling because we base so much of our identity on our relationship with time. We are the person with this history, heading toward that future, currently experiencing this present moment. But when you wake up, you begin to realize that time, as we experience it, is something consciousness creates, not something that exists independently. You start noticing moments of profound presence where time seems to stop entirely. You're washing dishes or walking in the park, and suddenly you're just here, completely here, not thinking about the past or planning the future, just present with the water running over your hands or the feeling of your feet on the ground. And in that moment, which might last 3 seconds or 30 minutes, you can't quite tell if is possible. You understand something that's impossible to put into words. This is all there is. This eternal now. This is where life actually happens. The past exists only as memory, which is happening now. The future exists only as imagination, which is happening now. Everything, absolutely everything, is happening in this present moment. There is nowhere else for anything to happen. I remember sitting with someone who was having a panic attack about their future. They were catastrophizing, building elaborate scenarios of failure and disaster. And I asked them a simple question. Right now, in this actual moment, as you sit here breathing, what is actually wrong? They stopped and looked around. Well, nothing. Right now, nothing is wrong. But tomorrow, next week, next month, yes, I said, but can you live tomorrow right now? This is what awakening reveals. We spend most of our lives not actually living, but thinking about living, planning to live, remembering having lived, worrying about whether we'll get to live. Meanwhile, life is happening right now, and we're missing it. When you feel time becoming strange and elastic, you're not going mad. You're starting to see through one of consciousness's greatest tricks, the illusion that time is something that carries us along, when really, we are the space in which all time appears and disappears. The fourth feeling can be quite alarming if you don't understand what's happening. You stop caring about things that used to seem desperately important. Not in a depressed or nihilistic way, but in a way that's oddly liberating. The promotion you were chasing, suddenly it seems less urgent. The argument you were winning, less important. The impression you were making, less compelling. It's not that you become lazy or irresponsible. It's that you see through the arbitrary nature of the games society asks us to play. People often mistake this for not caring about anything, but that's not what's happening. You're simply seeing which concerns are real and which are constructed. You're distinguishing between what actually matters and what you were told should matter. I knew a man who experienced this during his awakening. He'd been obsessed with his career for decades, climbing the corporate ladder, measuring his worth by his title and salary. Then something shifted. He began to see that his entire career was built on the fear of not being enough, the desperate need to prove his value to himself and others. Did he quit his job and become a monk? No. He kept working, but the quality of his relationship to the work changed entirely. He no longer needed the promotion to feel okay about himself. He no longer suffered over office politics. He could engage with the work without being enslaved by it. He was in the game, but not of it. This is what I mean by disturbing indifference. It disturbs your old self, the one that was motivated by fear and need and the endless pursuit of approval. But for your awakening self, it's freedom. You can participate in life fully without being owned by it. The things you do care about become clearer too. Real connection, authentic expression, beauty, truth, love, in its genuine form rather than its transactional form. These things suddenly matter more, not less. But the artificial concerns, the socially constructed anxieties, the manufactured needs, HEs, these begin to fall away like scales from your eyes. The fifth thing you feel, and this one can be socially awkward, is a heightened sensitivity to inauthenticity. You become acutely aware when people are performing rather than being, when conversations are rituals rather than genuine exchanges, when situations are more about appearance than reality. This doesn't make you judgmental, though others might perceive it that way. It simply makes it difficult to participate in the unconscious social dance that most people find comfortable. Small talk feels hollow. Polite pretenses feel exhausting. You find yourself unable to laugh at jokes that aren't funny, unable to pretend interest in topics that bore you, unable to maintain the pleasant mask that social situations often require. This can make you seem difficult, antisocial, or strange. People sense that you're not playing the game anymore, and this makes them uncomfortable, because when one person stops performing, it holds up a mirror to everyone else's performance. Your authenticity reveals their inauthenticity even when you're not trying to. You might find yourself leaving social gatherings early or declining invitations altogether, not because you don't like people, but because you can no longer tolerate the exhausting task of translating your depth into acceptable smallness. You'd rather be alone than pretend, rather have one real conversation than a dozen superficial ones. But here's what you discover. When you stop being inauthentic yourself, when you stop performing and start simply being, you attract different people, or rather the same people show up differently around you. Because authenticity has a way of calling forth authenticity in others. When you're genuinely present, genuinely yourself, you give others permission to drop their masks too. I remember a dinner party where I could feel this happening. Everyone was being polite, surface level, carefully edited. Then one person, a woman who'd been recently going through her own awakening, said something startlingly honest about her struggles. The entire energy in the room shifted. Suddenly people were real. The masks came off. The conversation became alive, human, touching. This is the gift hidden in your sensitivity to inauthenticity. You become a catalyst for realness. By refusing to perform, you create space for others to stop performing too. The sixth feeling is wonderfully paradoxical. You feel both infinitely expanded and utterly simple at the same time. Your sense of self grows to encompass everything nigh. You feel connected to all beings, all of life, the entire universe. And simultaneously, your sense of self contracts to nothing, just this simple awareness, this basic consciousness observing experience. One moment you're aware of yourself as a tiny human on a spinning planet in a vast cosmos, and you feel the overwhelming smallness of your individual concerns. The next moment you're aware of yourself as the consciousness in which the entire cosmos appears, and you feel infinitely large, infinitely spacious. This can be dizzying. Your identity becomes fluid rather than fixed. You're still you. You still have your personality, your history, your preferences, but you're also not just you. You're the awareness that's aware of being you. You're the space in which you appears. Think of it like watching a movie. You can get absorbed in the story, identified with the characters, caught up in the drama. That's the contracted state, I. You are a particular character with a particular story. But you can also remember that you're watching a movie, that you're the audience, that all these Characters and stories are appearing on the screen of your awareness. That's the expanded state. The awakened person learns to move fluidly between these perspectives. They can engage fully with their personal story when that's appropriate, and they can step back into the witnessing awareness when that's needed. They're both the wave and the ocean, both the actor and the audience, both the character and the consciousness. This double vision can be confusing at first. You might feel like you're losing your sense of who you are, but actually you're gaining a more complete sense. You're discovering that you're not one thing, but many layers: the personal self, the witnessing awareness, the universal consciousness, all existing simultaneously. The seventh and final feeling is perhaps the most challenging: an urgent desire to help others see what you're seeing, combined with the frustrating realization that you can't force anyone's awakening. It's like you've discovered fire, and you want to show everyone how warm it is, how useful, how beautiful. But most people are so used to the cold that they don't believe fire exists. Or they're so invested in the ways they've developed to cope with the cold that they're not interested in your fire. They've built elaborate systems for generating small amounts of warmth, and your talk of fire threatens their entire infrastructure. So you want to help, but you can't. You want to wake people up, but you can't. You want to share this incredible thing you've discovered, but there's no way to give it to someone. They have to discover it themselves. This can be agonizing. You see people suffering from problems that would disappear if they just shifted their perspective slightly. You see them trapped in prisons with doors that aren't locked. You see them searching desperately for something they already have, and you can't make them see it. The only thing you can do is be present, be authentic, be yourself, and trust that your presence, your way of being, might serve as a kind of invitation. Not everyone will accept the invitation. Most won't, at least not right away. But those who are ready, those who are already beginning to wake up, they'll sense something in you. They'll recognize a fellow traveler. This is why many awakened people become teachers, writers, artists, guides, not because they think they have all the answers, but because they want to offer maps for others who are beginning the journey. Not to tell people what to see, but to point in certain directions and say, you might find something interesting if you look here. These 7 feelings, the homesickness for nowhere, the clarity about suffering, the elasticity of time, the indifference to what doesn't matter, the sensitivity to inauthenticity, the simultaneous expansion and contraction, and the urgent desire to help. These are all signs that you're waking up. They're uncomfortable because they're dismantling your old way of being. They're challenging because they're inviting you into a more conscious way of living. But they're also gifts, every single one of them. They're consciousness recognizing itself, expanding, becoming more aware of its own nature. If you're experiencing these feelings, you're not going crazy. You're going sane in a world that's been crazy for so long it thinks its craziness is normal. You're seeing through the collective illusion, the agreed-upon reality that everyone else takes for granted. And yes, it can be lonely. Yes, it can be difficult. Yes, you might lose friends, leave jobs, end relationships that were built on who you used to be. But what you gain is so much more valuable. You gain yourself, your authentic, unedited, unconditioned self. The you that exists beneath all the roles and rules and expectations. The you that was always there, quietly waiting to be recognized. So if you feel these things, welcome them. Don't try to push them away or get back to normal. Normal was the dream. This is waking up. This is coming home to yourself. This is finally seeing what's actually here, what's always been here. You're not becoming someone new. You're remembering who you've always been. And that, my friends, is perhaps the greatest feeling of all.